So shall we make a start, Debbie? And
I think
people
so.
can join
Yes,
us?
I think that's a very good start. So I think what we're asking people to do is to turn off your microphones if you haven't already, simply because it's like with any sort of video conference call. If we all start talking at once, it can get quite busy quite quickly. And then when we get to the end, there'll be opportunity to post questions, or we could even turn microphones back on at that point if we've got time, and have the discussion at the end, if that's okay with everybody.
Perfect.
Okay,
right.
So we can't hear anybody speaking to us now, so I assume that's happened. So thank you very much.
That means plough on. Yeah, I can see lots of red microphones. So people,
fantastic.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much. So
okay.
shall we start with some introductions?
Cool. So do you want to go first, Shelley?
Okay. So my name is Shelley Poole. And my company is Wellington HR.
And I'm Debbie Morris, and my company is Concilium HR. So the way that Shelley and I work together is Shelley's business model is that she supports HR consultants, which is a brilliant model as far as I'm concerned. So Shelley is helping me through this period with doing collaborative working like this, and also helping me out where my own capacity means that I'm not going to be able to service my clients. So it's a really good working relationship. So thank you very much.
And what we've been busy with in the last week or so is lots of employer inquiries about the topic of working from home. And so we thought that a webinar today would be hopefully of benefit to various chamber members. I should say that the information given in this webinar is correct at the time of recording, but of course we have daily updates from Downing Street, and so things may change as we go forward.
I think it's evolving on an hourly basis, isn't it, at the moment?
It really is, but we're working hard to stay up to date. I should note for everybody that we are recording this hopefully we're recording this, if I've done it right, so that we can upload it to the Chamber website afterwards. And the format of today is that we're going to go through some frequently asked questions that we've prepared, that we're hearing from employers at the moment, give you our answers to that, and then at the end there'll be time for more questions, and if there's lots more questions we may even need to do a follow-up session, but let's see how things go.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to frequently asked question number 1 then, is why should I implement working from home, and who might it be suitable for? So the obvious first reason why you should be implementing it, if you can do, is that Boris is telling us to. So that's the absolute criteria at the moment, that if you can do home working, you absolutely should be doing home working. The benefits of that is it obviously enables you to keep trading, provides important services to your customer base, and actually might even give you an opportunity to explore delivering your business in a completely different way that up until now you haven't thought about. And I've just got the classic thing, the window cleaner's just arrived, so apologies if there's any background noise. I think it's a good way to keep your staff engaged at the moment, and it's about giving them a sense of purpose. So having some structure and routine for staff who otherwise might be stuck at home with nothing to do is also really, really important at the moment. So, we strongly encourage you to explore every and any opportunity for home working. And even if that's for doing tasks that people wouldn't normally be doing. So what we've been advising some of our clients to do is take this as an opportunity to get some of those jobs done that have been on your to-do list for an awful long time. If your website needs updating, have you got some staff who can work at home and get your website ready for the new launch when things get back to normal? So there's lots and lots of reasons why working from home is, a really, really beneficial thing to be implementing at the moment. In terms of who, the obvious one is your office-based staff, or your staff that provide telephone call services, that type of thing. If you're producing physical products, then clearly you can't work from home. So it's not suitable for manufacturing for the production side. However, your office-based staff in production might still be able to work from home to keep the general side of the business ticking over. What we would be saying is look at the nature of the role for home working and not the person. So under normal circumstances, you've got a flexible working request to say, can I work from home? You're looking at the role, but you're also looking at the individual to say, okay, are they suitable for home working? Do we trust them? How productive are they normally, etc.? This isn't normal times. This is extreme times. We're having to adapt the HR advice that we're giving to people. It's non-fluffy HR at the moment. Basically, it's right back to basics. So what we'd be saying is, you know, look at the role and the tasks that need doing, and if they can be done from home, sort it. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just sort of to add on to what you were saying about this not being normal times, Debbie, I am making that clear to employees when I'm corresponding
Absolutely.
with employees, to say that just because this is being granted now, that doesn't necessarily mean it would be in the future, because we are mindful that when we get back to normal, lots of people will be going, well, it was okay during coronavirus. Why is it okay now? So there are different circumstances.
Yeah, managing expectations is absolutely key at the moment. I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Shall we move on to number 2?
I think so. Yeah.
Super. So our second frequently asked question naturally follows: what are the alternatives if home working isn't suitable? Because there are going to be some jobs, like Debbie's window cleaner has just turned up.
He's working alone and he's 2 meters away from me, so we're okay.
That's what we like, because he hasn't probably got a long enough pole to do it from home, guys. So there are going to be some jobs that can't be done from home. And quite a lot of that, as Debbie said, is going to be down to the nature of the business or the tasks that people are doing. And so if this happens, you need to be managing risk as carefully as possible. So stay up to date with all of the government rules on social distancing and so on. Make sure that adequate soap and things, I know it's hard to get hold of, but is available to employees so they can keep going with their hygiene. Interestingly, I heard someone say that on the BBC that Richard Osmond is exactly 2 meters tall. So if you can, try and imagine him lying on the floor in between you and someone else. And also, even if you can't get everyone working from home, getting a number of your staff working from home can still help, because it means that you can move the other staff around so they're as far away from each other as possible. And some people might be a bit, well, I always sit at this desk, and people can get quite attached to their desks. But at the moment, if the greatest hardship you have to suffer is temporarily sitting at another desk, so you're further away from people, that's not really an unreasonable thing to ask other employees to do. One example I wanted to share is I work with an animation studio. They have 58 staff, and 57 of those staff are able to work from home at the moment, because one person goes in and makes sure that all the studio-based computers and drawing software is working and is booted up on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. And so the risk for that individual person going in is really minimized, because they're in a big animation studio by themselves. Mm-hmm. Although, of course, we have put in the relevant lone working measures for that person as well, to ensure their safety and other matters.
I'd add to that, Shelley, as well. I've got quite a few clients that are in a similar position, and they've naturally got fewer people in the building at the moment. So they're also looking at the shift patterns that people are working in. They're staggering times. They've closed the canteen, or they're only allowing one or two people in the canteen at any time, eating at the in the car. So they're looking at it from a really, really broad perspective, and taking absolutely every measure they possibly can to make sure that if they have got workers in their building, that they are absolutely following the rules. Yeah. And I've got one client who has got a very critical health and safety task that has to be carried out on a weekly basis, which is to relieve a pressure valve on a nitrous, or a nitrogen tank, I should say. So clearly that has to be done for obvious reasons. So the other thing that they've also put in place is they've given that person a letter, so that if they are travelling into work to undertake that critical task each week, and they do get stopped by the police asking them where they're going and why, they've got a letter from their employer explaining the task that they've been asked to do. So they're absolutely, thinking as broadly as they possibly can in terms of how they can keep people in work, but safely.
Yeah, and I think thinking broadly is absolutely key, because now is not the time to say, we can't do home working because, for example, we're a factory, therefore we carry on as normal.
Yeah.
It's about looking at being a little bit creative and finding some solutions to really make sure you're keeping people as safe
Yeah.
as possible.
And
And of course, there are going to be some places where we're saying home working isn't suitable because the business has been closed down. Pubs, restaurants, non-essential retailers, and so on. Now, that's a slightly different question to today's webinar because that brings us on to the topic of furlough leave, which is something most people hadn't heard of up until about a week ago. Whereby if you're actually having to lay staff off because they can't do work from home and the business is temporarily closed, the government is making provision for up to 80% of their salary with a gross monthly cap of 2.5 grand. Now that's quite a big topic, and there's lots of related things such as statutory sick pay that go with that. And if following today's webinar, we feel that there's a demand from employers for kind of more detailed information on that, Debbie and I are happy to do another webinar.
absolutely. Yeah.
To go into detail because there's quite a lot of it, so we wouldn't necessarily fit it into a half an hour today.
And of course, a lot of clients or companies are also voluntarily choosing to close at the moment because they're putting the health and safety of their workforce as a paramount concern for them. So there's lots and lots of different considerations around the home working factor at the moment, which, like we said earlier, is almost changing on a daily basis. Construction is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on today, I think. So
I think so. Yes.
That's likely to be different.
Shall we go on to number 3?
Absolutely.
Okay, so number 3.
Okay, so what practicalities do I need to take into account with home working? So again, going back to what we said earlier, the practicalities that you're thinking about now are going to be slightly different to the practicalities you'd be thinking about under normal circumstances. The obvious one being you'd normally carry out a full risk assessment, home visit, etc. That isn't going to be able to be happening. So you've got to be sensible. You don't take unnecessary risks, but there's some short-term risk assessments that you need to do now. And then once things settle and things have happened and you've got processes in place, then can't start to consider what longer-term assessments and adjustments and things you could be making. But the very first practicality is talking to your member of staff about their setup at home, what they need to do to keep themselves safe from the point of view of how they're working and where they're working. Think about the tasks that you're giving people. So what jobs can practically happen or realistically happen that will help your business to keep ticking over. And as I said earlier, also think about what tasks could be happening. Where are the silver linings in this? Is this an opportunity for you to actually get some things off the to-do list, which you currently haven't been able to do? So, think about what you can be offering. Confidentiality, GDPR, virus checking, security of information is obviously a big one for companies, and making sure that you've got processes in place for that. Equipment. So again, normally it's the employer that provides the equipment to staff to work from home. That may or may not be possible at the moment, or possible in the short term. So, you might have to allow staff to use their own computers, use their own phones, and then think about what software do they need, virus checking software, etc. But again, don't use that as a reason not to do it. Divert the phones from the office. It sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but in the panic that people are in at the moment, don't forget to divert the phones. So if you do get customers phoning your main number, where is that number going to? How is it going to be diverted across the team? And sharing the phone numbers amongst your team for the staff. So have you got personal mobile numbers? Have you got home phone numbers? Have you got home email addresses, etc.? So if you do need to contact people, can you do that? And don't just rely on mobile phone numbers, because the networks are going to be under significant pressure. So make sure you've got an alternative way of contacting your team. You've got things like passwords, administrator rights. So worst case scenario, if you've only got one person that's got the administrator rights to update your website, and they fall ill and can't make changes, how else are you going to be then updating and things like that on a daily basis? So just take a check on who's got access to key passwords and ability to make changes. Upskilling staff is another one to a practical consideration. Don't rely solely on one person to carry out a particular task. Upskill as many of your team as you can, so that the tasks that you have assigned for home working can be carried out as widely as possible. Worst case scenario is your key people fall sick themselves and can't work for a period. Who else within your team who's working from home can then pick up those duties and keep things running. We've also got employer liability insurance. So, just double check your insurance policies. Are you covered for home working? You still remain liable for your staff when they are working from home. So a quick phone call or a quick check of your policy is advisable. IT support is another one to consider. So you've got all these staff working from home, and if they're anything like me, IT skills may not be their first area of expertise. So if they do run into a problem with software or a technical issue, who is the IT contact person, and what is your backup IT support should that person themselves be currently unavailable. I think that's most of the practicalities, Shelley. Have I missed anything?
Yeah, of course there are going to be some sort of business specific things, but I think those are some good ones. I would also just chip in, Helen on the chat has made a good point about putting up physical notices if possible on premise doors, just to explain that you are still open and how to contact any customers. How customers can contact you even, and having a social media presence just to say we are working, but we're working remotely, just so people don't think, oh, they've shut up shop and just disappeared for 12 weeks.
I guess another one to add to that actually would be your Outlook out of office messaging and things like that. So if you are getting emails in from clients or business associates, do you need to be putting a message up on your email system just to let people know that you'll get back to them within a certain time? But additional flexibility is currently being looked at.
Yes, yeah. So that's a really good point. Thank you, Helen, for sort of dropping that one in. And again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, that this isn't the normal provision for working from home. So some of the exceptions, like getting people to use their own laptops, are having to be made, because I know of different clients who've gone out and tried to buy laptops and they are quite hard to get hold of. I don't think they're not quite toilet roll at the moment.
No, it's especially now you can't pop to Curry's at the moment, can you, to pick up a laptop, unfortunately. So it's you're definitely having to make some exceptions that you wouldn't normally be making. That's absolutely certain. Yeah.
Right, let's press on to number 4 in that case. So how do I ensure that employees are productive and don't just spend all day in bed? Because I think if you're paying people, that's a reasonable thing to be worried about. And so structure should be encouraged, because you know what it's like if you go on holiday. Your main target might, you're a really nice relaxing resort. Your main target for the day might be just making breakfast on time. And when we're at home, it's easy to lose track of time. And so we should encourage employees to follow a structure. And where possible, this should include following some working hours. However, those might not necessarily be the same working hours as normal. There might be reasons why you might need to vary those. And Debbie's going to come on to that for the next question, so I'm not going to steal her thunder now. I would also recommend focus on what people are achieving. Focus on their output, possibly more than their hours of work. Be clear what you want people to achieve, and check that they are achieving that. Because if that means they spend a little bit of time during the day putting the washing on or something like that, but they're still hitting their targets and they're doing what you need them to do as a business, at the moment, in these exceptional times, I'd say that's a win. Make sure you're regularly checking in with people, and that's important for productivity, but we'll also come on to it again in a later question because it can be really helpful information. Make sure you're using technology. If possible, you've got your shared drives and so on, and that's important for making sure that people are productive, but also making sure that they don't have absolutely loads of work on their personal laptop that isn't then shared back with the company, because if they then become unwell or their laptop dies or something like that happens, you don't want it all to be lost. So encourage people to be emailing work in, using shared drives as appropriate. And try and introduce variety if possible as well. I know it may not necessarily be easy, but rather than sort of putting one person in charge of a separate thing within the team and having them working on it for a whole week, people are naturally going to lose interest. And also going back to what Debbie said before, if one person's in charge of one thing and only one person knows how to do it, that could leave you a little bit exposed. So if you have the skills and the ability to mix up the work, then try and do that. And some really great comments have been coming in while I've been speaking, which I'm going to share as well. Right, Maria's one about childcare. Debbie's going to come on to that, so I'm going to leave that one just for a minute.
Yeah.
But Helen's made a really good point about having group Zoom calls and individual Skype calls and things. You may have seen the memes going around LinkedIn about kind of the different levels of grooming people put in. Actually, I guess a Skype or Zoom call is a good way of making sure people have got out of bed. Maria said about having a group call at 11 o'clock every day and having a virtual coffee. That's fantastic for motivation as well as kind of just making sure that you're checking in with people.
Yeah, don't forget the cake, Maria. We need virtual cake as well as the virtual coffee at the moment, so don't forget the cake.
Yes, yeah. So these things serve a shared purpose. It's not just about sort of sitting on your staff and going, have you done that thing? It's also about motivation, and in a later question we're going to come on to some more things that we can do. We've got to catch the cake first, apparently. Okay, right, I'm going to move on to number 5, so back to you, Debbie.
Yeah, so the big one at the moment, I think, is how flexible do I need to be around working patterns and hours? So again, you know, we can't reiterate enough that this is not normal times, this is not normal home working advice. Normally you would not accept a flexible working request to work from home because I want to look after my child. That would be an outright no. There is a big issue for people out there at the moment. You're being told to work from home and the schools and nurseries are closing. So many workers are faced with a massive dilemma now about trying to balance their working priorities and their children and their families. I think, you know, you've got to be as flexible as you reasonably can be within the limits of, you know, the core hours that you may have agreed with them, or, you know, needing to be at the computer for 11 o'clock for that team Skype call. So, you know, absolute structure is still needed, but agree with the team on an individual basis what they can realistically achieve. Who else have they got working from home at the moment? So in my personal circumstance, my husband is now working from home indefinitely as well. Thankfully, we've been able to create 2 separate office spaces, and we are basically team tagging our 6-year-old. So we've managed to work out a little bit of a routine with within the household and my husband with his employer to sort of agree that Mackenzie's needs are met from both a homeschooling point of view, but also his mental well-being and having some quality playtime, etc., with us being able to get our work delivered in a way that we need to do. Now, obviously, I'm very fortunate. I'm self-employed anyway, so I'm kind of used to working, you know, in a very flexible manner, but that is going to be quite a new concept for many people. So, you know, helping them to find a pattern that works for you as a company, but also works for them, and acknowledging the fact that they have got many pressures on at the moment. Encourage them to still have a lunch break, encourage them to go out for their daily walk, look at what their start times could be. So, you know, it might be that they can start at a much earlier time than they would do normally. Some staff might be offering to work ridiculously late at night to make up for hours that they've not worked during the day. Within reason, obviously all of that can be agreed, but again, I still wouldn't necessarily be advising that you're encouraging your workers to work at, you know, 12 o'clock midnight, 1 a.m, because that's just not going to be sensible in a long-term basis. Think about having sort of staggered shifts, as it were. So if you were in the work, or if you are still in the workplace, that applies also. But think about if you've got a group of staff that can start working at, say, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you have another group or individual that starts at 7, another one that starts at 8, and so on, and then they each finish at a slightly different time. Your business is still being operated and potentially being operated over a longer daily period than it would do normally, but you're allowing that flexibility for those individuals. And you've also got to be bearing in mind the restrictions that people are facing at the moment in terms of grocery shopping, needing to care for elderly relatives, or going to the pharmacy to pick up prescriptions. So there might be certain things where, you know, if they can only get their groceries delivered at 11 o'clock on Tuesday, then, you know, they're not going to be working for a short space of time at that moment in time waiting for their groceries to arrive. So, you know, have that structure, think about what your business needs in terms of what tasks you've given people to do, but flexibility is absolutely key at the moment, and that also links back to them feeling motivated, engaged with you and productive, because if you've shown them flexibility, they will hopefully reciprocate and do whatever they can to help you back to get those tasks completed.
Yeah, I would echo that. Helen's put a really good comment on while you've been speaking, saying that she's happy with people kind of slightly altering their hours and taking a walk during the day, so long as the work gets done. And she said, "Oh, it's lucky my team's been really supportive," but actually, I don't think it is lucky. I think it's part of that reciprocity of you're looking after them, they're looking after you.
It really is, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours at the moment, and, you know, and that will come back in dividends when this is all over. You know, it's about how your staff are feeling at the moment, and if you can make your staff feel as positive as they can during really, really difficult times, your workforce will then come back re-engaged, loyal, and say thank you for making that as easy as you possibly could for me. I am now going to do my absolute best by you and the company.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I love it. We've also just had another comment from Helen saying we have fancy dress and cocktails and Zoom on Friday. Love that.
Fantastic.
That links in. It's like we've sent you the PowerPoint in advance, Helen, because it links into our last topic of how can I maintain employee motivation and engagement. And as we were just saying, it might feel at the moment like, oh gosh, that's just a fluffy thing. I'm not interested in that. I just need to get through this. I need to keep the business afloat. But actually, a lot of conversations I've had with employers and employees, how both parties behave towards each other now, I think is probably going to be remembered for a little while. And so actually, this is quite important, because when we're back to it and we're busy again, then we want everyone on board. We want to be in the best position to have everyone working hard. So remember that people are people would be the first tip, which sounds blindingly obvious, but then they have a life that includes the job but isn't just the job. And so remember their welfare. Remember to sort of take care of them. Thank them for their achievements. Again, when we're busy, we can often just think someone's done something, fine, on to the next thing. But actually, if they're doing well, then acknowledge that, because it can be pretty lonely being at home. Acknowledge difficulties they've experienced. And this sounds a really horrible thing to mention, but over the coming weeks, those difficulties might include a bereavement. And so now have a think about your position on compassionate leave, because whilst there isn't a statutory entitlement, most employers will want to make some provision for people, but you know, and just remember that people might be caring for ill relatives and things as well. This is potentially going to be a pretty challenging few weeks. As we said, try and arrange those virtual meetings, and more good comments have come in. Alistair's been saying about, you know, the odd drink at 5 o'clock on a Friday after a stressful week. Yeah, there's no reason that we can't keep a social connection just because we're not all in the same place. Yeah. Make sure you're doing regular reviews of the situation with people as well. Even if you're just saying to people, the situation hasn't changed in the last 2 weeks because Boris is still telling us we can't go outside. that sends a message that you haven't just forgotten people, and that you're keeping an eye on the situation, and that you don't necessarily want it to stay as it is forever either. So I think that's sort of quite important. And encourage them to make sure they're looking after their welfare. Because I had an employee, for example, email me and say, the schools have closed, we're going to have to do homeschooling. In order to try and fit this in, I'm going to miss my lunch break every day. And it was like, no, bless you, but you do need to eat, because we can't get through the next 12 weeks or however long we're inside for not eating. So it encouraged them to look after welfare. And it goes back to Helen's earlier point about, we're allowed one bit of exercise a day. Encourage people to take it. Although it's funny, I'm sure National, the NHS and Public Health England have for years been telling us that we need to take more exercise, and lots of us have been ignoring them. And now all of a sudden we're told that we can't take any exercise. We're really keen to exercise. So hopefully people are doing that.
I'll just chip in there, Chair. What I'm doing with my little man at the moment is we are still walking to school, not literally. But we have, we do our normal routine in the morning, and then we are putting on our coats, we're putting on our shoes, and we are doing 20 laps of the garden.
Wow.
And whilst we do 20 laps of the garden, which is getting our exercise in before we start schooling, one of us is counting up from 20 and one of us is counting down from 20, and then we're adding the two numbers together, and lo and behold, they add up to 20. So we're also doing a little bit of maths.
Wow.
So, it's encouraging the team to, multitask, get your exercise, but also do a bit of homeschooling at the same time. So,
I like that. That's a good shout.
It's going to get a little bit boring after, it was only day 3, the novelty's still there. Whether we're still doing that on week 12 is anyone's guess. But,
yes,
but
yeah. And so Gemma's also just commented as well, kind of linked to that, recommending the Joe Wicks PE for children.
Yes,
thing.
absolutely.
On social media, I think the grown-ups like it slightly more than the children.
I did an hour of Cosmic Kids yoga yesterday. I was on my hands and knees mooing like a cow. We were doing spaceships. We were doing all sorts of things. It was a massive amount of fun. And I was getting some exercise as well as being with my little boy as well. So, and I actually did genuinely feel calmer afterwards. So, yeah, it's, combining exercise with home childcare and, the work motivation and engagement as well is possible.
Yes, I look forward to you mooing on your hands and knees for the next webinar, Debbie.
That probably wasn't the best example to be giving, to be fair, but yeah.
It is just being a little bit creative and remembering that a little bit of fun is okay. And that animation studio that I was talking to you about earlier, I'm organising an esports tournament because they've got lots of gamers there, just to make sure they've got that connection going. Right, so we're over time. I'm sorry, we failed on the half an hour front, but we've done all of our frequently asked questions. I know some people have to shoot off or have already had to shoot off. However, if people have questions, quite happy to respond to those if people are happy staying online now.
Absolutely.
And while people take a moment to type, I'm just going to put the next thing up to share it. If you have a question specific to your business that you think, oh, I don't know that I want to share that on a webinar, but I feel like these two would know the answer. Or if you feel like you've got things that you would like us to address in a future webinar, because we're really happy to do that as things evolve. Then you can drop either of us an email, and we work together, so we won't get precious about who you email. No. So please do email us, and I've put our email addresses up on the screen just at the moment. And so if we get a request to do a future webinar on something like furlough leave, for example, or if we get lots of questions through, then we will put something else on again, because the questions are just going to develop as we go through. Right, so I'm not seeing any new questions other than, will we do another one of these, which we are quite
absolutely, yeah.
So that's all good. Right, so, oh my gosh, I've just realised you were supposed to do the last slide, Debbie. Sorry, I stole it.
That's okay, that's fine. I let you carry on, my love. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on a flow.
What a team. Would you like to do the last one?
I can do, yeah.
Although I think I might have said some of that in there as well.
Yeah, that's fine. So what we had a quick chat about yesterday as well is it's about looking forward as well. We're very much focused on the here and now at the moment, but we can also start to develop some webinars for when things start getting back to normal. So, you know, you may suddenly have an influx of flexible working requests because people quite like working from home. So, you know, we can do a webinar on how we manage that, how you do some contingency planning about getting your business back on track. What emotional support you can be putting in place for your teams, because as Shelley mentioned earlier, some of them may have gone through some very, very difficult times over the next few weeks. So, you know, how we can gradually bring people back into the workplace. So there's all sorts of different topics we can do. So we're very, very open to suggestions coming in. If there's particular topics that you'd like us to look at, then do please let us know and we will do our best to work on something for you. So yeah, so the obvious one is furlough leave, so we can work on that. And thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for listening. We hope you found that helpful.
Yeah, I'm just going to
put your microphones back on. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much to both of you. That was really interesting, and some excellent and helpful tips there. And I know that there's a lot of you know, people that have been on the call that will get a lot of reassurance from that. As Shelley and Debbie both say, if you've got any kind of specific questions, I appreciate a chat box is not necessarily somewhere where you might want to ask a question about your business, so feel free to contact them directly. But thank you very, very much. We are obviously updating our list of webinars that we're doing with members as we go. As has already been said, it is an ever-changing and fast-moving situation, so we're seeing things coming up. We've got one coming up on the cash flow that businesses might be struggling with, how to make the most of that. That's on the website, and we've also just put up a mental health workshop, which will be next Wednesday at 2:30. So it might be that you want to encourage your staff to jump on that as well as you. I think there's nothing better than hearing it yourself as well. So again, thank you very much, guys. Any further advice you need, feel free to contact Shelley and Debbie directly. We've already had some great support in terms of furloughing and a letter from Debbie. So thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Anything we can do to help at the moment, it's exceptional times. So you know, we're all here to give support to each other. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies. That was brilliant. Really good.
My pleasure. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye then. Bye.